So how do you feel about Bleach being in the same hands as the anime studio that brought you Dragon Ball and One Piece? Because with all this crazy news that we recently got about Bleach, it seems as though something major is happening with the franchise, and yeah, I'm still kind of shocked after hearing what just happened with Bleach and what this could mean for the future of everything related to it. Okay, so in case you don't know, Bleach's anime has been historically from the very beginning produced by Studio Pierrot. They're the same studio behind series like Naruto, Naruto Shippuden, Tokyo Ghoul, Boruto. Like, they've done a lot of major titles, and from the very beginning of the anime, Bleach has been under that umbrella, so to speak. And even right now, as the anime is continuing to release, heading towards its climax with the fourth and final core of the Bleach Thousand Year Blood War anime, Studio Pierrot is still at the helm of this and still the studio behind producing all these new episodes to adapt the entirety of the Bleach series. So in case you're worried about Bleach's Thousand Year Blood War taking a turn for the worst as far as like switching studios mid-production, I want to assure you that is not what is happening here, because Bleach is still going to be produced at the very least for the Thousand Year Blood War by Studio Pierrot, and ultimately all of that is still intact. However, we recently got major word regarding Bleach's catalog and ultimately everything of the original Bleach anime heading towards a different direction, and again, this could mean major stuff for the future of the Bleach franchise, because it started off with Toei Animation, again the same studio behind Dragon Ball and One Piece, posting that Toei Animation channel has newly released works that are starting streaming in March, and one of them was Bleach. And a lot of people are like, well, wait a minute, how the heck would Toei be streaming Bleach if notoriously Bleach has always been under the umbrella of Studio Pierrot? What's going on here? Oh yo, and before we continue, hit that subscribe button and that bell. You'll be connected to one of the most authentic anime channels out there. Hit them buttons. Word has been circulating that Toei Animation has bought the streaming rights for the old Bleach anime in Japan, essentially the very beginning all the way up to the arc that comes just before the Thousand Year Blood War. So everything from the original Bleach anime is going to be now streaming under Toei Animation's umbrella. And you're probably thinking like, okay, that's interesting, but why the heck would they even do that, considering, you know, Bleach is pretty much for the most part over outside of this final core? And two, does this mean anything for the future as far as, again, why would Toei invest in something like that? Because you got to imagine, for them to get the streaming rights, especially in particular in their local native place of Japan, like, why? And honestly, that's something that I started thinking to myself, well, wait a minute, considering that Bleach's anime is already heading towards its end, right? Like, we got the Thousand Year Blood War, and by the end of this year, Bleach's TV anime will have adapted the entirety of the original Bleach manga, of course not including the spin-off chapter that came out and all of the light novels that still haven't been adapted into anime format. That stuff hasn't happened yet. But as far as Bleach's, you know, story from the original manga by Tite Kubo, that has pretty much already been, for the most part, well adapted, and this final core is going to be the finale. So as far as like Toei Animation trying to profit off of the buzz that Bleach has generated with the Thousand Year Blood War, if anything, it probably would have made more sense for them to have done that, if that's their goal, earlier on in the airing of the Bleach Thousand Year Blood War. If they would have done this a few years back and grabbed the rights for Bleach, because, you know, Thousand Year Blood War is coming out, of course stocks is gonna go up, everybody's gonna be running back to rewatch Bleach to get prepared for Thousand Year Blood War, that would have made sense. Doing this at the final hour, so to speak, the final year of Bleach's Thousand Year Blood War, after this year, unless we get more announcements, which we probably will as far as future Bleach projects go, but as far as like the TV anime hype and all of that stuff that goes, where, you know, if a Bleach season airs, you got about a few months of people non-stop talking about Bleach. So I don't necessarily believe that Toei Animation is simply trying to cash in on the Thousand Year Blood War craze, because again, it probably would have made more sense and it would have been a lot more profitable to do that earlier on, opposed to now, where once this final core wraps up, you're only gonna be getting big Bleach things that happens if there's like films or future projects, but there's nothing that is right now guaranteed, at the very least to the public knowledge. So then the why more so must mean that there's something else that is possibly transpiring, and that leads me to believe that there's potential, there's a possibility that Toei Animation is potentially grabbing this old catalog, because maybe they have plans and maybe they're either going to do a partnership or somewhere along the line minds ultimately do something where they get the rights to reanimate the original Bleach anime. Honestly, that makes a lot more sense of essentially like, hey, grabbing the old catalog to get people excited, get people hyped, get people that maybe they don't watch things that are related to Studio Pierrot, or it doesn't hit their algorithm, so to speak. But if it's in Toei's ballpark, well, it starts and establishes a relationship with a new viewership of fans that basically are going to be introduced to Bleach for the first time. And at the same time, if they are either working or have plans in the future to create a new Bleach anime, well, they already got the property, and essentially when that new Bleach anime does arrive, they are going to benefit immensely from people rewatching the old anime in preparation for the remake. And honestly, it just seems like it would be the biggest benefit possible if they are indeed having plans to essentially recreate, remake the Bleach anime for the beginning all the way up until right before the 1,000-Year Blood War. They only have the rights up until that point, and two, it probably wouldn't make much sense right now at the very least to try and even attempt to remake the 1,000-Year Blood War, because it only just came out recently and it's very well done. However, the older Bleach anime, even though it's still a classic, still something that anybody can get into and watch and enjoy, for the most part, enough time has passed and animation techniques and art has, you know, changed enough to where it kind of warrants like, okay, a Bleach remake, that makes sense. So Toei Animation could very well be prepping for one of the biggest plot twists ever, because nobody would have expected for, out of all studios, Toei Animation, who has been pretty much for the most part notoriously in competition for quite some time with Studio Pierrot, as far as like going back to the big 3 days. You had Naruto and Bleach on one side of things with Studio Pierrot, and One Piece on the other side of things with Toei Animation. They've been in competition for quite some time, and for them to now get the rights to Bleach, it could of course very well be just that they decided, yo, they want to beef up their catalog, and grabbing the rights for Bleach's old anime will help to extend things. Or it could very well be that Toei Animation is about to make the biggest move possible, remaking the Bleach anime. They of course seen the reaction and the excitement and the anticipation and the value in a Bleach remake after that whole trailer came out for the anniversary, where they showcased, you know, the original scenes of Bleach being remade, and everybody was really excited about it. So it could very well be a case of Toei looking at it like there's a massive value in that, and maybe Studio Pierrot for the foreseeable future doesn't have plans or doesn't have the time to even attempt to go back to do that, because right now Studio Pierrot, once they're done with Bleach, they still have two other massive IPs and massive projects that they're going to be working on via the Black Clover anime return, and of course the Boruto franchise, Boruto IP, that they're going to be focusing heavily on in the future. They may not have the time, or essentially Bleach after the 1,000-Year Blood War is done might not be the biggest priority as far as going back and doing a remake. Future Bleach projects, as far as like movies and adaptations of the light novel and all that stuff, might be on the table, but as far as a remake goes, Studio Pierrot might not have that in the cards. And if Toei Animation said, yo, we wouldn't mind taking that on, that would make sense. Honestly, it threw everybody for a surprise, simply because, again, Toei Animation is like one of the last studios that you would expect to do this. But at the same time, considering we've been seeing certain things that we never really necessarily seen before happening right in front of our eyes. For example, Toei Animation allowing another studio to take on One Piece to do the One Piece remake studio with. So it's not far-fetched for a studio to take on another IP and see what they can do with it. For those that are worried, considering Toei Animation is at the moment with a few IPs that they're working on as far as continuing the One Piece anime, although One Piece anime now is a little bit different, where the Toei Animation version is only going to be a seasonal anime, and then the Dragon Ball Super return, outside of this enhanced version that they're working on with the Beerus arc and moving forward, technically there won't be the, you know, new stuff, the Moro arc, for at the very least a year or two as the enhanced version airs on TV. So technically Toei Animation, outside of other projects when it comes to like the Shonen Battle stuff, they really only have One Piece for the seasonal stuff and Dragon Ball for, well, right now working on it for when it comes out with the Moro arc. So they may have the staff, they may have the time, and at the same time, as far as what my expectations are, I think that they can get it done. We've seen when Toei Animation really puts their efforts in what they can do. One Piece anime was weekly and trying to keep up with the manga, and ultimately looked amazing even for a weekly release. This is not the Toei Animation where people, you know, could be skeptical and say like, oh, you know, look what they did to this one and that one. Toei Animation has come a long way, and I truly believe that if they are indeed working on a Bleach remake, hence why they would grab the entire catalog of the older Bleach anime, we could be in for a massive surprise. That's all I have for this one. I'm Tim. As always, people, have an awesome day. Peace in.